office mistake made her the billionaire CEO date. What happened next shocked everyone. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Ava adjusted her glasses for the third time, clutching her folder like a lifeline as she walked into the glass-walled conference room. Her heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that matched the thundering of her heart. This was it, the biggest presentation of her short career at Cross Enterprises, the kind of meeting that could make her or send her packing before lunch. She whispered under her breath, "Don't trip. Don't drop anything. Don't embarrass yourself." Unfortunately, fate had a sense of humor. The room was packed with sharp suits and sharper eyes, investors, board members, and at the head of the table sat Ethan Cross himself, the billionaire CEO whose reputation for perfection was as flawless as the tailored suit on his 6-foot frame. His icy blue gaze flicked toward her for a fraction of a second, enough to make her knees wobble. "Miss Lane," he said, voice like velvet over steel. "Ready?" Ava forced a smile. "Absolutely." She set her laptop on the sleek table, hands trembling slightly as she connected it to the massive projector that dominated the far wall. The screen flickered to life, graphs, charts, and carefully curated slides filling the space in glorious high definition. Perfect, she thought. I've got this. Then, disaster struck. As she stepped back to adjust a cable, her heel caught on the strap of her bag. The next few seconds played out in cinematic slow motion. Ava stumbling forward, one hand flailing, the other clutching her laptop cord like a lifeline. Yanking the cable free. The screen went black. Completely, devastatingly black. A stunned silence settled over the room, the kind that presses on your eardrums and makes every heartbeat sound like a drumline. Ava froze. Her laptop slid across the polished table with a loud clack. Someone coughed. Another whispered, "What happened?" From the head of the table, Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Calm, clipped, lethal. "Miss Lane, would you care to explain why a multi-million-dollar presentation just went dark?" Ava's throat went dry. Her brain screamed run, but her mouth decided to improvise. It's the projector. It needed a break. Overworked." A couple of muffled chuckles rippled through the room. Ethan didn't laugh. His expression didn't even twitch. "Fix it," he said simply. "Right. Of course, fixing. That's, my middle name," she muttered, scrambling for the cable like a soldier defusing a bomb. Her cheeks burned as she crawled under the table, praying the floor would swallow her whole. 30 seconds stretched into 30 years. She finally managed to reconnect the cord. And not only did the screen light up, but so did her hopes of survival. "Done!" she announced, popping up with triumph, and cracking her head on the underside of the table. Hard. The investors gasped. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose like a man reconsidering all his life choices. Ava straightened, trying to ignore the throbbing bump forming on her forehead. "All good now," she said with a sheepish smile. "Smooth as silk." Ethan's ice-blue gaze locked on hers, unreadable but intense enough to make her knees tremble again. "We'll discuss your performance later," he said quietly. Ava swallowed hard, and as the meeting resumed, one truth burned in her mind louder than any presentation slide. Her career was hanging by a thread, and that thread was wrapped tightly around Ethan Cross's perfectly manicured hand. Ava had never experienced a walk of shame quite like this. The glass corridor leading to Ethan Cross's office stretched ahead, like a runway of doom. Every step echoed against the marble floor as heads peeked over cubicle walls, eyes wide with a curiosity only an office scandal could inspire. Whispers chased her like shadows. "Is she in trouble?" "Fired for sure." She's lucky he didn't throw the projector at her. Ava forced a smile at no one in particular, silently chanting, "Stay calm, don't faint, and for the love of caffeine, don't cry." At the end of the corridor stood a pair of towering glass doors etched with the words, Ethan Cross, CEO. Beyond them, she could already see him, leaning against his sleek desk, suit jacket off, crisp white shirt hugging every line of his broad shoulders. His tie hung loose, but somehow that made him look more dangerous, not less. When the assistant waved her in, Ava stepped inside like she was walking into a lion's den. Ethan didn't look up immediately. He clicked something on his phone, his jaw tight, like a man wrestling with patience. When his eyes finally lifted, they pinned her in place like an icy spotlight. "Miss Lane," he said, voice smooth and controlled, but with an undertone that sent a chill racing down her spine. "Have a seat." Ava perched on the edge of the leather chair, clutching her notebook like a shield. "Listen, about the, incident?" "Incident?" His brow arched sharply. "That's an interesting word for what nearly became a seven-figure disaster." She swallowed hard. "In my defense, the cable had a personal vendetta against me." His lips twitched, barely, but Ava didn't miss it. Oh my God, did he almost smile? No, impossible. Ethan straightened, moving from behind the desk. His presence filled the room like an approaching storm. "Do you know what the board saw in that room, Miss Lane? A blank screen and an intern crawling under a table like a commando?" She offered weakly. For one infinitesimal second, his mouth curved. Then it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "They saw incompetence, and incompetence costs money." Heat rushed to her cheeks. "I am not incompetent," she said before she could stop herself. He stopped right in front of her chair, towering over her with arms crossed. "You're not?" "No." She met his gaze, pulse racing. "I'm clumsy, yes. A walking hazard, maybe, but incompetent? Number, give me a spreadsheet and I'll make it sing." His brows lifted, intrigued despite himself. Bold words from someone who almost derailed my investor pitch. Ava exhaled slowly. "Look, I messed up. Big time. If you're going to fire me, fine. But don't pretend I didn't work my butt off to get those numbers right. The mistake wasn't the work. It was gravity conspiring against me." For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her like she was some puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture he had of her. Then, instead of firing her on the spot, he turned and walked back to his desk. "Go back to your department," he said, his tone unreadable. "We'll talk later." Ava blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." He picked up his phone, effectively dismissing her. Heart pounding, Ava rose from the chair, her mind reeling. He wasn't firing her? Why? What was his game? As she stepped out of the glass doors, whispers erupted again, but Ava barely heard them. One thought consumed her. Why didn't Ethan Cross end my career right there? Little did she know, the answer would change everything. By the time Ava made it back to her floor, her phone was vibrating like a trapped bee. Text after text flooded in from colleagues, each one a variation of the same question. "Are you okay?" Her desk looked exactly as she left it, except for the curious heads peeking over monitors like meerkats. As soon as she sat down, her best friend at the firm, Mia, popped up from the next cubicle like a caffeinated jack-in-the-box. "Spill everything." Mia plopped into Ava's chair before Ava could even take a breath. Ava groaned, burying her face in her hands. "It was bad, no. Scratch that, it was catastrophic. Think Titanic, but without the romance or the violins." Mia widened her eyes. "That bad?" "Worse," Ava muttered. "The screen went black. I went under the table, and I may have head-butted the furniture in the process." Mia slapped a hand over her mouth, eyes sparkling. "Oh my God, please tell me someone recorded it." Ava shot her a death glare. If anyone posts a video, I'm changing my name and moving to Antarctica. Mia stifled a laugh, then leaned closer. So, what did his royal perfection say? You mean Ethan Cross? Ava rolled her eyes, tugging at her blouse to hide the sweat marks. Not much. Just death threats with his eyes. And, Mia pressed, and he didn't fire me. Mia's jaw dropped. Wait, what? That man once terminated someone for using Comic Sans in a quarterly report. And you turned his investor meeting into a blackout party, and you still have a job? Ava shrugged helplessly. I don't know. He said we'd talk later. Which sounds like something villains say before they press the big red button. Mia's grin turned mischievous. Or maybe he sees potential, or maybe... No, Ava cut in quickly. Don't even start. This is not some office rom-com. This is real life, and real life includes unemployment. But even as she said it, a small, inconvenient thought tugged at the back of her mind. Why didn't he fire me? As the day crawled on, whispers spread like wildfire. Every time Ava walked into the break room, conversations died mid-sentence. Someone even made a meme of her crawling under the conference table with the caption, Mission Impossible Investor Protocol. She groaned, pressing her forehead to the cool surface of her desk. This is my life now. I'm a meme. Mia chuckled, patting her shoulder. Hey, memes are the new resumes. You might go viral. Great. Exactly what I need, fame for face planting in front of billionaires. Just as Ava was about to escape into a mountain of spreadsheets, her inbox pinged. She clicked, and her stomach dropped. Subject: Meeting. Tomorrow morning from Ethan Cross. Her pulse spiked so hard it was audible in her ears. She clicked the email open. Miss Lane, be in my office at 9 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. No signature, no smiley face. Just pure, ice-cold authority. Ava slumped in her chair, staring at the screen like it had just sentenced her to life in prison. Mia peeked over her shoulder, eyes gleaming. Ooh, the boss summons. Girl, this is either your last day or the beginning of something juicy. Ava glared. If by juicy you mean catastrophic, then yes. But deep down behind the sarcasm and panic, something else stirred. A mix of dread, curiosity, and something she really didn't want to name. Because the truth was, for all his arrogance and control-freak tendencies, Ethan Cross was impossible to ignore. Ethan Cross did not believe in accidents. In his world, everything was either a calculated risk or a costly mistake, and mistakes were intolerable. Which explained why, at 8:45 a.m. sharp, he was pacing his glass-walled office like a predator in an Armani cage, his phone glued to his ear. Yes, I'm aware the investors are still skittish, he said, his voice clipped and controlled. And yes, I'm working on a solution. By tomorrow night, the narrative changes. He hung up before the caller could respond, exhaling slowly through his nose. His jaw flexed as he scanned the pristine skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. New York glittered like a jewel beneath him, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt the pressure of a deal slipping from his iron grip. Last night's disaster, the blackout during his pitch, was already trending in hushed tones across boardrooms. Some thought it was bad luck. Others thought Cross Enterprises was losing its legendary edge. Both perceptions were poison. Damage control, Ethan muttered, striding back to his desk as his intercom buzzed. Sir? His assistant's voice crackled through. Your 9 o'clock is here. Send her in. Seconds later, the door opened and Ava Lane stepped inside. She looked different today, still nervous, still fidgeting with her glasses, but dressed in a soft cream blouse and tailored skirt that, against her better judgment, made her look almost confident. Ethan's gaze flicked over her briefly before settling on her wide brown eyes. You wanted to see me? She asked, clutching her notebook like a shield. Ethan gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Sit. Ava obeyed, bracing for the pink slip. Instead, Ethan remained standing, arms folded, every inch the commanding CEO. Last night's presentation, he began, his voice even, was a disaster. Ava winced. You don't say. Most CEOs would have fired you on the spot, he continued. Ava nodded quickly. Which is why I wore waterproof mascara today. Ethan's lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement, but his tone stayed cool. But I didn't fire you. Do you know why? Ava blinked. Because you secretly enjoy chaos? Because, he said, ignoring the quip, you made an impression. Investors don't forget, and neither does the media. Media? Ava frowned. Ethan slid a sleek tablet across the desk. On the screen, a headline blared. Tech Titans big pitch crashes. But who's the mystery analyst who stole the spotlight? Below it, a blurry photo of Ava crawling under the table like a soldier on a mission had gone viral, racking up thousands of likes. Ava groaned, burying her face in her hands. Oh no, I'm a meme again, aren't I? Several memes, Ethan corrected dryly. But this, he tapped the headline, is a problem. The board thinks I've lost control of the narrative. Investors need reassurance. The press needs a distraction. Ava peeked between her fingers. And what does that have to do with me? Ethan stepped closer, his presence radiating confidence and something else Ava couldn't quite name. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. The city's elite will be there. If the headlines show me with someone unexpected, someone smart, relatable, it shifts the story, makes me look human. Ava's brain short-circuited. Wait, are you saying? I'm asking, Ethan said smoothly, that you attend the gala as my date. Ava choked on her own breath. Me? The human disaster you just called a problem? Exactly, Ethan said, his tone calm but his eyes glinting with something almost mischievous. No one will see it coming, which makes it perfect. Ava stared at him, heart pounding like a bass drum. This was insane, suicidal even. Her instincts screamed to say no, run, quit, move to a remote village with no Wi-Fi. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "What's in it for me?" Ethan's lips curved, just enough to make her breath hitch. A guaranteed future here, a bonus that could buy you a new car, and the satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Ava blinked, mouth dry. You're serious? Deadly, he said. So, do we have a deal? Her pulse roared in her ears as she stared at the billionaire whose life she'd turned upside down less than 24 hours ago. What could possibly go wrong? Ava blinked at Ethan like he'd just suggested they rob a bank together. You want me to be your date? At a gala? The kind where people wear gowns that cost more than my entire student debt? Ethan's expression didn't waver. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who never heard the word no. The sunlight framed his tall figure, turning him into something straight out of a luxury cologne ad, and Ava hated herself a little for noticing. Yes, he said simply, as if this were the most logical solution in the world. Ava laughed, loud, awkward, slightly hysterical. Wow, okay, let me just check my calendar real quick. She mimed, flipping an imaginary planner. Oh, look, tomorrow night I'm booked for a bubble bath and binge-watching true crime documentaries, so... Sorry? Ethan didn't smile. He walked toward her with that slow, deliberate stride that made her pulse trip over itself. When he stopped in front of her chair, she swore the temperature dropped and spiked at the same time. This isn't optional, he said, voice low but firm. It's a business arrangement. Ava tilted her head. Business arrangement? Sounds romantic. I need someone who can keep the press talking for the right reasons. Ethan continued, ignoring her sarcasm. Someone who isn't a socialite with an agenda. Someone unpredictable. Unpredictable? Ava raised an eyebrow. That's one way to describe a walking Wi-Fi hazard. Exactly, Ethan said, almost smiling. No one will see this coming, which makes it perfect. Ava folded her arms, trying to look confident while internally screaming. And what do I get out of this besides being turned into a human headline? Ethan's gaze held hers, unwavering. A guaranteed position here, beyond your internship, a 5-figure bonus wired to your account, and the opportunity to fix the impression you made yesterday. Ava's jaw nearly unhinged. 5 figures? For playing dress-up and pretending to like you for one night? Ethan's lips curved slightly. Pretending. Her cheeks burned. You know what I mean. I know you're smart enough to say yes, he said smoothly, sliding a sleek envelope across the desk. This is a formal agreement. My lawyers drafted it this morning. Ava stared at the envelope like it contained a cursed treasure map. You already had a contract prepared? I like to plan ahead, Ethan replied, matter of fact. She hesitated, heart thudding like a bass drum. This was insane, dangerous, possibly life-ruining. But then her brain flashed images of last month's rent notice, her overdue credit card bill, and the soul-crushing grind of job applications if this internship tanked. Her fingers twitched. What's the catch? Ethan leaned in just slightly, enough to make her breath hitch. You follow my lead. You keep the act believable, and under no circumstances do you fall for me. Ava blinked, then burst out laughing. Oh, trust me, Mr. Cross, you are the last person on earth I'd ever... Good, he said, cutting her off with a calmness that somehow made the air thicker. Then we have no problem. Ava stared at the envelope, then at him. He was watching her like a chess player waiting for his opponent to make the inevitable move. Her pulse roared in her ears as she whispered, This is the craziest thing I've ever done. Ethan's mouth curved into that sharp, knowing half-smile. Then you're already halfway to yes. Ava stared at the sleek black envelope on Ethan's desk as if it contained a live grenade. Her brain was a whirlpool of thoughts. This is insane. This is reckless. This is 5 figures. Go ahead, Ethan said, his tone deceptively casual as he leaned against the edge of his desk. Open it. She picked it up with the caution of someone defusing a bomb, slid a manicured finger under the flap, and pulled out a stack of crisp legal papers. The header alone screamed intimidation, agreement of mutual representation, and confidentiality. Wow, Ava said flatly. You didn't just draft a contract. You drafted the constitution of fake dating. Ethan's lips curved ever so slightly. I like things clear. She skimmed the first paragraph, her brows shooting up. Clause 1. Both parties agree to present themselves as a mutually consenting couple for the duration of the public event. Ava looked up. A mutually consenting couple? That sounds weirdly Victorian. It's legal terminology, Ethan replied. It's cringe, Ava shot back, flipping to the next section. Clause 3. The undersigned will remain in close proximity to maintain the illusion of intimacy. She snorted. So what does that mean? Holding hands, sharing dessert, whispering sweet nothings about EBITDA margins? If necessary, Ethan said smoothly, clearly unbothered. Ava rolled her eyes and kept reading. Clause 5. Under no circumstances will physical intimacy extend beyond the scope of public optics. She glanced up, smirking. Wow, you really spelled out the no kissing rule. Someone's scared of cooties. Someone, Ethan said evenly, understands that boundaries prevent lawsuits. Ava grinned, leaning back in her chair, What if someone hypothetically decides to break Clause 5? His gaze flicked up from the papers, pinning her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. Then someone would be in breach of contract. She held his stare for a beat longer than necessary before muttering, "Yikes, romantic." He ignored the jab. "You'll sign at the bottom of page 3. Ava tapped her pen against the desk, considering her options. "This is wild, you know that, right? Like Lifetime movie wild." Ethan's voice softened just a fraction, though his face remained unreadable. "You need this opportunity, Ava, and frankly, so do I. One night, you play the part, you get the payoff, and we both walk away with what we want." She exhaled, her pulse thudding in her ears. He wasn't wrong. Her bank account was drowning. Her career was hanging by a thread. And yet, there was something about the way he looked at her. Like he knew she was going to say yes. Like refusal wasn't even an option. Gripping the pen, Ava signed her name with a flourish. "Fine. But if this ends with me trending on TikTok as number fake fiancé, you're buying me ice cream for life." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Deal." As she slid the signed pages back across the desk, their fingers brushed. Just for a second, but long enough for something electric to arc between them. Ava cleared her throat, ignoring the sudden heat crawling up her neck. "So, what now? Do I get a crash course on how to survive among the glitterati without accidentally drinking the centerpiece?" Ethan's smirk widened. "First, we get you a dress." Ava groaned. "Oh no. Please tell me this doesn't involve stilettos." "It involves couture," Ethan said, checking his watch, "and a stylist who owes me a favor." Ava buried her face in her hands. "Goodbye, bubble bath. Hello, anxiety couture." Ethan's quiet chuckle followed her out of the office, lingering in her mind long after the door clicked shut. Ava's Saturday mornings usually involved pajamas, cereal, and the comfort of Netflix. Not being chauffeured in a sleek black car to what might as well have been the gates of fashion heaven. The car pulled up in front of an ultra-modern boutique with gold lettering that screamed, "Don't even breathe near our gowns unless your credit limit starts with 6 zeros." Ava gulped as a perfectly groomed stylist swept toward her like a runway goddess, clipboard in hand. "You must be Ava," the stylist purred, giving her a once-over that could only be described as surgical. "Oh, honey, we have work to do." "Hi," Ava said weakly, clutching her tote bag like a security blanket. "Just a heads up, I don't usually wear things that sparkle unless it's glitter glue." The stylist ignored her, snapping her fingers at 2 assistants. Within seconds, Ava was ushered into a plush fitting room that smelled faintly of champagne and success. Racks of gowns shimmered under soft lighting, silks, satins, and fabrics Ava couldn't even pronounce. "Okay," the stylist declared, hands on hips. "We're going for understated elegance with a dash of power. Something that says, I'm with him, but I don't need him." Ava blinked. Great. I think." The next hour was a whirlwind of zippers, pins, and Ava wobbling dangerously in heels that felt like medieval torture devices. "Nope," the stylist muttered, yanking off a sequined disaster. "Too pageant." "Oh, no," she groaned at another. "Too bridesmaid at a Vegas wedding." Finally, she held up a deep emerald gown that caught the light like liquid gemstones. "This," the stylist announced, eyes gleaming. "This is her." Ava slipped into it, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an imposter. The gown hugged her curves without screaming for attention. The plunging neckline tastefully bold. The slit just high enough to say confident instead of call HR. When the stylist added a pair of diamond drop earrings and swept Ava's hair into a soft, romantic updo, even Ava barely recognized herself. Wow, she whispered to the mirror. Who is that? That, the stylist said smugly, is the woman who's about to break the internet. Before Ava could respond, the boutique door opened, and in walked Ethan. He wasn't supposed to be here yet, but there he was in a tailored charcoal suit that fit him like sin, his icy composure unshaken as always. Except when his eyes landed on her. For a fraction of a second, Ethan froze. It was subtle, just a flicker of surprise, quickly masked under that practiced billionaire cool. But Ava caught it, and God help her, it sent a rush of warmth straight through her veins. What do you think? The stylist asked, practically vibrating with pride. Ethan's gaze swept over Ava slowly, lingering just long enough to make her pulse trip over itself. It'll do, he said at last, voice calm, but slightly rougher than usual. Ava arched an eyebrow. Wow, don't overwhelm me with compliments, Mr. Cross. One corner of his mouth lifted, barely. You look adequate. Uh-huh, Ava deadpanned, ignoring the way her stomach fluttered. And by adequate, you mean drop-dead stunning, right? He smirked faintly. Don't push your luck. The stylist clapped her hands. All right, lovebirds, time to finalize accessories. Not lovebirds, Ava blurted, cheeks heating. Ethan didn't even flinch. He just offered his arm like a man born to command ballrooms and headlines. Ready? He asked, voice smooth as glass. Ava swallowed hard, sliding her hand into the crook of his arm. The contact sent a jolt up her spine. Ready? Ha! She wasn't ready for any of this, but as they walked out together, paparazzi dreams already forming in the stylist's eyes, one thought kept circling in Ava's mind. If this is just for one night, why does it already feel like trouble? Ava had seen fancy parties before. On TV, in glossy magazines, in that one movie where everyone spoke with British accents and judged each other silently over tea. But nothing prepared her for this. The gala was held in a glass-domed ballroom perched above Manhattan like a crown. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting prisms across marble floors. Tables were draped in silk. Champagne flowed like water, and the air smelled faintly of roses and money. As their sleek black car rolled to a stop, Ava clutched her clutch like a lifeline. Okay, so, what exactly is the game plan? Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, calm as a man walking into his own living room. We walk in, smile for the cameras, act like a couple. Then we leave without you tripping into a centerpiece. Ava groaned. Wow, confidence in me radiates from your every pore. He smirked slightly. I've learned to prepare for unpredictability. Unpredictability? Ava echoed. That's such a polite way to say disaster. Before he could respond, the door opened and flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. Reporters shouted Ethan's name, lenses zeroing in on the Power CEO, and the woman on his arm. Ready? He asked, extending his hand. Ava stared at it for a heartbeat, then slid her fingers into his. Warm, firm, completely steady, even as her own pulse did cartwheels. When she stepped out, the world tilted. Cameras flashed, voices called. For a moment, Ava forgot how to breathe. Smile, Ethan murmured under his breath, his hand settling at the small of her back. His touch was light, barely there, yet it burned like an ember against her skin. Ava pasted on what she hoped was a glamorous smile and not the terrified grimace of someone about to faint. She's stunning, someone whispered nearby. Who is she? Headlines were already being born in the minds of every paparazzo on the street. Ava could practically see tomorrow's gossip blogs. Tech titan debuts mystery woman at annual gala. They ascended the marble staircase together, a perfectly choreographed duet of power and elegance. Ethan led her with effortless grace, nodding to familiar faces, exuding the kind of authority that made people part like the Red Sea. Ava, meanwhile, was internally screaming, "Don't trip, don't sweat through the dress, don't. Oh my God, is that a former First Lady?" Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere hummed with wealth and whispers. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne. Ava accepted a flute, mostly so her hands had something to do besides tremble. "Relax," Ethan murmured as they moved through the glittering crowd, his tone low enough to make it feel intimate. "You're doing fine." "Fine," she hissed back. "I feel like an exotic zoo exhibit. Observe the rare species, the intern in the wild." He smirked faintly, guiding her toward a cluster of investors. "Remember the plan. Smile, nod, and let me do the talking." As Ethan launched into smooth conversation with a pair of gray-haired moguls, Ava tried to focus on looking elegant and not like a deer in headlights. But then, one of the investors turned to her. "And you are," he asked, eyes curious but calculating. Ava froze for half a beat, then flashed what she prayed was a confident smile. "Ava Lane," she said. "Ethan's +1. Something mischievous sparked in her as she added, "But honestly, between us, I'm just here for the free champagne and shrimp cocktails." The investor blinked, then burst out laughing. "I like her," he told Ethan. Ethan's jaw tightened for a microsecond. Annoyance? Amusement? Both? Before he smoothly changed the subject. But Ava swore she saw something flicker in his eyes when they moved on. Something like reluctant admiration. As they wove through the crowd, Ava couldn't help noticing the sideways glances, the whispered speculation, the subtle shift in the room's energy. She was no longer the intern who broke the projector. Tonight, she was someone else entirely. Someone who belonged on Ethan Cross's arm, even if only for one night. When the orchestra struck up a waltz and Ethan extended his hand again, Ava felt her heart thud against her ribs. "Ready to dance?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost teasing. "Define ready," she muttered, slipping her hand into his. And as he led her onto the gleaming dance floor, Ava realized something terrifying. This wasn't just pretending anymore. Not for her. The waltz wasn't a waltz. It was a public test. At least that's how it felt to Ava as she let Ethan lead her onto the dance floor, her pulse pounding louder than the violins. His hand settled on her waist with infuriating ease, his other hand holding hers firmly, as if the gala, the cameras, and the curious whispers didn't exist. "You're tense," Ethan murmured, his breath grazing her ear. "I'm not tense," Ava lied, stepping on his foot almost immediately. "Okay, maybe a little tense." His lips twitched, the ghost of a smirk. "Relax, Lane, it's just a dance, not a merger." "Yeah, well, mergers don't usually involve me in 4-inch heels," she shot back, trying not to trip over her own feet. To her credit, after a few turns, Ava found her rhythm, or at least stopped crushing his Italian leather shoes. The music swelled. There, movement sinking, and for one terrifying moment she forgot they were pretending, until she showed up. "Ethan." The voice was silk, dipped in venom. Ava turned to see a woman gliding toward them, a vision in crimson satin, with legs that went on for days and a smile sharp enough to slice diamonds. Her perfectly arched brow lifted as her gaze flicked to Ava, assessing, dismissing, then circling back like a predator, choosing whether to pounce. "Clara," Ethan said smoothly, his tone polite but glacial. "Didn't realize you'd be here." "Of course you didn't," Clara purred, resting manicured fingers on his arm as if Ava wasn't standing right there. "Imagine my surprise when I saw the papers this morning. Ethan Cross with a date." And such an unexpected choice. Ava's smile tightened. Unexpected choice? Oh, sweetheart, I'll show you unexpected. Hi, Ava said brightly, slipping closer to Ethan and looping her arm through his in a move that was both instinctive and petty. Ava Lane, Ethan's girlfriend. Clara's eyes widened by a millimeter before her smile sharpened further. Girlfriend? How quaint. Yes, Ava said sweetly. It's new, but passionate. She glanced up at Ethan, batting her lashes with theatrical innocence. Isn't that right, darling? Ethan's jaw ticked. But instead of shutting her down, he played along. His arm slid around Ava's waist, pulling her flush against him with a casual dominance that stole her breath. Very, he said softly, his voice carrying just enough steel to make Clara's smile falter. Clara recovered quickly, but the flash of irritation in her eyes was victory enough for Ava. After a few more biting pleasantries, Clara slithered away, her perfume lingering like an expensive threat. The moment she was out of earshot, Ava exhaled hard. Well, she muttered. She was delightful. Clara doesn't like surprises, Ethan said calmly, steering them off the dance floor. No kidding. Pretty sure she tried to set me on fire with her eyes. She's an old acquaintance, Ethan said, his tone revealing nothing. And that frustrated Ava more than it should have. Old acquaintance, huh? She teased. Is that billionaire code for X who still wants to marry your money? His lips curved faintly. Jealous, Miss Lane? Ava scoffed. Please, the only thing I'm jealous of is her ability to walk in those heels without looking like a baby giraffe. His chuckle was low, warm, and far too distracting. Relax, he murmured, leaning closer as another photographer raised a camera. Remember, we're supposed to look like a couple in love. Before Ava could respond, his hand brushed against hers, fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. The cameras flashed, capturing what everyone in that glittering room wanted to believe. Ethan Cross, untouchable billionaire, utterly smitten with the woman on his arm. The trouble was, for Ava, pretending didn't feel like pretending anymore. The orchestra's melody drifted through the glittering ballroom, elegant and hypnotic. Ava barely heard it. Her heart was hammering too loudly, drowning out everything but the sensation of Ethan's hand on her waist. After Clara's pointed exit, Ethan had drawn her back onto the dance floor. Not for the cameras this time. Most of the press had already scattered. This was for appearances with the investors, yes, but the look in his eyes said it was also something else. Something he wasn't saying aloud. Relax, he murmured again as they glided across the marble. His voice was velvet, low and steady, the kind that could make board members sign away empires. I am relaxed, Ava lied, her voice a shaky whisper as her heel skimmed dangerously close to his shoe. Really? His lips curved slightly, the hint of a smirk tugging at their corners. Then why are you gripping my shoulder like it's a life raft? She glanced down, realizing her fingers were clutching his suit like she was about to be swept out to sea. Heat flushed her cheeks as she loosened her grip. Sorry, I just haven't danced since 8th grade gym class, and that was a Macarena. He chuckled, the sound low and warm, vibrating against her palm. You're doing fine, he said softly, guiding her with effortless precision. Ava risked a glance up and immediately wished she hadn't, because Ethan was looking at her, really looking, and his gaze was enough to make her forget where her feet were. His eyes were molten steel, intense yet unreadable, and for a fraction of a second, the world outside those eyes didn't exist. Her breath hitched as his thumb brushed lightly against her back, just above the fabric of her gown. The contact was barely there, but it sent a jolt racing down her spine like an electric current. See? He murmured. You're getting the hang of it. Yeah, she whispered, her voice trembling with something that had nothing to do with dancing. They turned gracefully, her dress swirling like liquid emerald around her legs. And then it happened. Their faces inches apart, their steps slowing until the rest of the room blurred into a haze of glitter and music. Ava could feel his breath on her lips, warm and steady, her heart thrumming like a drumline. For one suspended moment, the entire charade, the contract, the gala, the prying eyes, melted away, leaving just this: a man and a woman standing on the edge of something neither of them had planned for. Ethan's gaze dipped, lingering on her mouth. Ava's pulse stuttered. Every sensible thought screamed, "Don't do this," but her body leaned in like gravity had made its choice. And then, crash. A waiter stumbled nearby, sending a tray of champagne, glasses shattering across the marble like a crystal explosion. The spell snapped in an instant. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the music stuttered to a halt. Ava jerked back, heat flooding her cheeks. Ethan straightened, his jaw tight, expression shuttered, like a steel door slamming shut. "You okay?" he asked, his tone measured, but his voice sounded rougher than before. "Yeah," she croaked, fumbling for composure. "Just startled." His eyes lingered on hers for a heartbeat longer. Something dark flickering there. Frustration? Desire? Both? Then he cleared his throat and stepped back, putting just enough space between them to make her feel like the moment had never happened. But Ava knew better. So did he. And as the orchestra resumed its melody, one thought blared louder than the music in her head. What happens when pretending feels this real? The gala ended in a glittering blur of champagne flutes and polite smiles. By the time Ava slid into the back of Ethan's sleek black car, her feet were screaming. Her cheeks ached from smiling, and her brain was still replaying that moment, the almost kiss, the way the world had narrowed to the space between their lips, until fate, in the form of a clumsy waiter, had shattered it with a tray of glass. Now, the city's lights streaked past the tinted windows as silence stretched, like a tightrope between them. Ethan sat beside her, perfectly composed as always, scrolling through his phone like the evening hadn't nearly detonated something between them. Ava fiddled with the clasp on her clutch, stealing a sideways glance at him. He looked maddeningly calm. No ruffled hair, no flushed cheeks, just cool, contained power in a charcoal suit that still looked immaculate. Meanwhile, she felt like a shaken soda can about to explode. "Successful night," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. His tone was smooth, unreadable. "Successful?" Ava echoed, her voice pitching higher than intended. "We survived a ballroom full of billionaires, 3 reporters, and 1 ex-girlfriend from Mean Girls, the couture edition. So yeah, sure, let's call that a win." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. "You handled yourself well." Ava blinked. "Was that a compliment? Should I frame it? Put it on my resume?" "Don't get used to it," he said dryly, but there was a trace of warmth beneath the words that made her heart do a stupid little somersault. She crossed her legs, trying to ignore the electricity still humming in the space between them. "So, was that all part of the plan? You know, the swooping in when Clara was about to eat me alive, pulling me close like some kind of rom-com hero?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Clara likes to test boundaries. I didn't want her questioning ours." "Right," Ava said softly, looking out the window to hide her face. "Ours," as if there wasn't ours. A beat of silence passed, then Ethan surprised her. "You were good in there," he said quietly. "Quick thinking, holding your own. I underestimated you." Ava turned, startled by the sincerity in his tone. For the first time tonight, The steel in his voice softened, and something in his expression, barely there but real, looked almost vulnerable. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "Wow," she said, forcing a teasing lilt into her voice. "Two compliments in one night. Careful, Cross, people will start thinking you're human." His lips curved faintly. "Don't push it." For a few seconds, the car filled with nothing but the low hum of the engine and the distant wail of a siren. Then Ava, against her better judgment, asked the question clawing at her mind. "Do you ever get tired of it?" Ethan glanced at her, brows drawing together. "Tired of what?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely. "The parties, the cameras, being perfect all the time." He didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to the city lights outside, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost reflective. "Perfection isn't real," he said simply, "but people expect it. So you give them what they want." Something in her chest tugged painfully. For all his control and composure, Ethan sounded lonely. And Ava hated how much she wanted to peel back every layer of armor he wore. "You don't always have to," she said softly. His eyes flicked back to hers then, sharp, searching, like her words had hit a nerve. For one breathless moment, the car felt too small, too charged, like they were teetering on the edge of that unfinished moment from the dance floor. Then the driver announced, "We're here," shattering the fragile thread between them. Ethan straightened, mask sliding back into place. "I'll have the car drop you home," he said, his tone brisk again. Ava nodded, clutching her bag like it could anchor her spinning thoughts. "Sure. Thanks for, you know, not letting Clara kill me with her eyes." He almost smiled. "Anytime." And just like that, he was gone, striding into the night like nothing had happened, while Ava sat in the back seat, her pulse still tangled in a question she couldn't shake. What happens when the man who's supposed to be untouchable starts feeling dangerously close? The first thing Ava noticed when she woke up was the sunlight spilling across her sheets. The second thing was the vibration on her nightstand, a relentless buzzing that could only mean one thing: trouble. Groaning, she reached for her phone and blinked at the screen. Then she sat up so fast the blanket tangled around her legs. Her notifications were a tidal wave. Missed calls, messages, and headlines. So many headlines. Ethan Cross debuts Mystery Woman at Charity Gala. Power Couple of the Year, Cross spotted with Stunning Date. Who is she? Billionaire CEOs plus one steals the spotlight. Ava scrolled further and her stomach dropped. Photo after photo flooded the screen. Her in that emerald gown, laughing at something Ethan had said, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Another showed them on the dance floor, eyes locked, their faces close enough to make the world assume the obvious. "Oh, no," she whispered, clutching the phone like it might bite her. Then came the comments. Endless speculation, breathless analysis, entire paragraphs debating who she was and what she meant to him. And the captions weren't helping. Is this a fling or something more? Ava buried her face in her pillow and let out a muffled scream. Her phone buzzed again. Mia. Of course, Ava answered with a strangled groan. "Good morning, superstar," Mia practically shrieked. "You are everywhere. Everywhere. Newspapers, blogs, maybe even a billboard by now." Ava flopped back against the pillows. "Fantastic. I always dreamed of being famous for standing near a billionaire." "Famous? Honey, you're a phenomenon. People are obsessed. There are already fan theories about your zodiac sign." Ava sat up, clutching her hair. "This is insane. How do I make it stop?" "You don't," Mia said cheerfully. "You write it. Smile for the cameras. And for the love of all things holy, do not trip again." Before Ava could respond, another call lit up her screen. Ethan. Mia, I have to go, Ava muttered, her stomach somersaulting. She switched lines. Morning? Get dressed, Ethan said, his voice calm but sharp. We have a situation. Oh, you mean the situation where I woke up as a tabloid headline? This isn't a joke, he said flatly. If we don't control the narrative, they'll invent one. And trust me, theirs will be worse. So, what's your brilliant plan? Breakfast, Ethan said, with a photographer. Ava's jaw dropped. Excuse me? We're giving them what they want, he explained, his tone cool, controlled. A picture-perfect couple enjoying a private brunch. It keeps the story harmless, keeps investors calm, and keeps you from looking accidental. Accidental? Ava sputtered. Wow, your pep talks are unmatched. You signed the contract, he reminded her, unruffled. 9 o'clock. Wear something casual, but make it look expensive. The line went dead before she could protest. Ava stared at her phone, heart thudding. Casual but expensive? The most expensive thing she owned was a handbag from a discount rack. Casual but expensive, she muttered, yanking open her closet. Sure, let me just grab my silk yacht pajamas and diamond sneakers. As she scrambled into the least wrinkled blouse in her possession, Ava caught her reflection in the mirror and froze. Last night, she had slipped into a world that wasn't hers, a world of chandeliers and champagne smiles. But this morning, she was back to being Ava Lane, overworked, underpaid, and now front page news. And deep down in the quiet corners of her mind, one thought pulsed louder than all the headlines. This was supposed to be pretend. So why does it feel more real with every passing hour? Ava sat in the quiet corner of the rooftop cafe, staring at the skyline like it might offer a way out of this surreal mess. Sunlight glinted off the glass towers, but all Ava could think about was the photographer lurking discreetly by the potted plants and the billionaire sitting across from her. Calm, composed, and infuriatingly unreadable. Ethan Cross looked like the human embodiment of a luxury ad campaign. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie this time, making him appear just a little more approachable. Except for the fact that every inch of him still screamed control. Smile, he said without even looking up from the leather-bound menu. Smile? Ava hissed through her clenched teeth, plastering on what she hoped passed for casual joy. You dragged me to a rooftop brunch with a paparazzi hiding in the ficus, and you want me to smile? It's not a paparazzi, he replied smoothly. It's a professional photographer. There's a difference. Yeah, Ava muttered. One gets paid by tabloids, the other by billionaires trying to save face. He finally glanced up, and that cool gray stare locked onto hers like a laser. You agreed to this. I agreed to one gala, she shot back. One night of pretending, not a press tour. Things changed. He leaned forward, his tone lowering just enough to make her pulse pick up. The headlines aren't going away. If anything, they're escalating. Ava's heart sank. Escalating how? He slid his phone across the table. She glanced down and almost choked on her mimosa. Wedding bells for Wall Street's favorite CEO? Cross and his mystery woman. Is this the real deal? They think we're engaged? She squeaked, shoving the phone back like it was on fire. For now it's speculation, Ethan said calmly, as if they weren't sitting in the eye of a media hurricane. But if we let it spiral out of control, the company becomes collateral damage. Ava gaped at him. Collateral damage? Ethan, I'm an intern, not an actress. I can barely fake enthusiasm in staff meetings, let alone whatever this is. He steepled his fingers, studying her with that unnerving stillness. You've handled yourself better than most seasoned PR professionals would have. Last night, you charmed half the investor board. I wasn't charming, Ava argued. I was panicking in heels. His lips twitched, barely. Whatever it was, it worked. Ava groaned, dragging her hands over her face. What are you saying? I'm saying, Ethan replied, his voice dropping into that authoritative tone that always left little room for argument. We extend the arrangement. Her head snapped up. Extend, as in keep pretending to be your girlfriend? For a few weeks, he said like it was the most reasonable request in the world. Until the next shareholder announcement and annual reports are out. A few weeks? Ava nearly laughed. Ethan, people already think we're engaged. What happens when they notice we're not? What's the exit strategy here? A staged breakup with matching press releases? If necessary, he said without hesitation. She stared at him, jaw dropping. Wow, you really have thought this through. I plan for contingencies, he replied coolly. You benefit too. Full-time position, generous compensation, and... His gaze flicked briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. A chance to rewrite the impression you left in that boardroom. Her pulse skittered. So my options are 1, go back to being the intern who broke the projector, or 2, fake date Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, while the entire internet analyzes my hand placement. Essentially, Ethan said, his expression infuriatingly calm. Ava leaned back in her chair, staring at the blue sky like it might beam down divine intervention. You are impossible. And yet, he said softly, you're still here. The photographer's shutter clicked in the background, capturing a perfect shot of her glaring at him, while he smirked like the devil in a bespoke suit. Ava sighed, reaching for her mimosa. Fine, but when this blows up in our faces, I'm haunting you. Ethan's smirk deepened. Noted. And as he signaled for the check with effortless command, Ava realized something chilling. This wasn't just a deal anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. And she was holding the match. 2 weeks. That's how long Ava had been living in this bizarre parallel universe where brunches were photo ops, hand-holding was a contractual obligation, and her name trended online more often than her favorite celebrity crush. 2 weeks of smiling for cameras, answering questions with rehearsed charm, and ignoring the fact that her heart did a stupid little flip every time Ethan looked at her like she was more than just a solution to his PR nightmare. And now, she was standing in his penthouse kitchen, staring at a view so gorgeous it could make postcards jealous, while Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine like this was the most normal thing in the world. It wasn't. Remind me again why the photographer had to capture us in 3 different cafes today? Ava muttered, sinking onto a stool at the Marble Island. Are we trying to break a record for most candid couple photos that aren't actually candid? Ethan handed her a glass, his movements calm, precise. Consistency sells a story, he said simply. Huh? Right, Ava said, taking a sip. Because nothing screams authenticity like matching lattes and fake laughter. His mouth curved slightly. You didn't look fake. Ava blinked. What? You didn't look fake, he repeated, meeting her eyes. You laughed like you meant it. Heat crept up her neck. Maybe I was laughing at the absurdity of all this. Or maybe, he said softly, you were enjoying yourself. Ava's heart did that annoying somersault again. She set the glass down a little too quickly. Don't read into things, Cross. This is business. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, wrapping the room in gold and silver. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged, humming like static before a storm. Ethan leaned against the counter, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms that Ava refused to stare at, and failed. You've been good at this, he said finally. Better than I expected. Ava snorted. Gee, thanks. High praise from the man who once called me a liability. I was wrong, he admitted, and those 3 words, simple, unadorned, hit harder than they should have. She blinked. Wow, did Ethan Cross just confess to being wrong? Alert the media. He didn't smile. Instead, his gaze stayed on her, steady and unflinching. You've surprised me, Ava. More than once. Her pulse skittered. She wanted to look away, make a joke, anything, but something in his eyes rooted her in place. Something raw, stripped of the steel armor he usually wore. Don't do that, she whispered before she could stop herself. Do what? Look at me like that, she said, her voice barely audible. Like this is real. His jaw tightened. Who says it isn't? Ava's breath caught. For a moment, the world outside, the contracts, the headlines, the pretense vanished. There was just him, standing inches away, his voice low and rough, his eyes burning into hers. She swallowed hard. Ethan. He moved closer slowly, as if giving her time to stop him. She didn't. Couldn't. Her body was a live wire, her heart a drumline, every sense screaming with something she'd sworn she wouldn't feel. And then his phone buzzed. Loud, jarring, breaking the moment like glass underfoot. Ethan stepped back, the mask sliding over his face so fast it made her dizzy. He glanced at the screen, his voice clipped. I need to take this. Ava nodded, forcing a smile that felt like paper. Of course, business never sleeps. He disappeared into his office, leaving Ava staring at her untouched wine, her pulse still rioting. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead and let out a shaky laugh. What am I doing? Because the truth was terrifyingly clear. The walls she'd built to keep her heart safe, they were cracking, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop them from falling. The restaurant was the kind of place where the wine list had its own zip code and the chandeliers probably cost more than Ava's entire college education. She followed Ethan through the hushed, dimly lit dining room, acutely aware of every stare they drew. Not that Ethan noticed or cared. He moved like a man born to command rooms like this, exuding the kind of effortless confidence that made heads turn and whispers spark like static. This is the investor dinner, he murmured as they approached a long table near the windows. Keep it light. Keep it polite. Right, Ava whispered back. Smile, nod, try not to spill soup on a billionaire. Ethan shot her a look that said, don't even joke about it. She flashed him a grin, because annoying him was fast becoming her favorite sport. They reached the table where a handful of powerful men and women rose to greet Ethan like royalty. Ava pasted on her most convincing smile as introductions began, each handshake reminding her that she was playing in a league where one wrong move could start a media wildfire. And then he appeared. Cross. The voice was deep, confident, laced with something that immediately set Ava's teeth on edge. She turned and nearly recoiled. The man was handsome in a too-perfect way, with a shark smile and a gaze that lingered just a little too long. Harper, Ethan said smoothly, his expression cooling by 10 degrees. Oh, so this was that guy. Didn't know you'd be here, Harper said, his eyes flicking briefly to Ava before landing back on Ethan with a smirk. And with company. Interesting. Ava felt his stare like a physical weight. It wasn't admiration. It was calculation. Pleasure to meet you, she said, offering her hand. Harper took it, holding on a second too long, his smile dripping charm that felt anything but charming. So you're the mystery woman everyone's talking about, Harper drawled, his voice pitched just loud enough for the table to hear. Quite the upgrade, Ethan. She's unexpected. Ava's smile tightened, her pulse spiking. Upgrade? Unexpected? Wow. Someone skipped his lesson on basic manners. Ethan's jaw ticked. Enough small talk, he said evenly, sliding his arm around Ava's chair with a possessive ease that made her breath hitch. Shall we start? Dinner unfolded in a blur of polite laughter, sparkling wine, and Harper's relentless commentary. Every time Ava spoke, Harper found a way to twist it into something teasing, his smirk daring Ethan to react. And Ethan did. Subtly at first, a hand resting firmly on Ava's knee under the table, a quiet brush of his fingers against hers when passing the breadbasket. But when Harper leaned in during dessert, his voice dropping as he murmured, "If you ever get bored of Mr. Perfect over here, give me a call," Ethan snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a smile so sharp it could cut glass, Ethan leaned forward and said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as deadly, "She won't." The table fell silent. Harper's smirk faltered just for a heartbeat before he chuckled like nothing had happened. But Ava felt the tension coil like a spring under the polished surface. When dinner finally ended, Ethan guided her out with a hand at the small of her back, his touch firm, his stride tight with control. The moment they slid into the back of the car, Ava exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "Well," she said, forcing a shaky laugh, "that wasn't awkward at all." Ethan said nothing. His jaw was clenched, his eyes dark, staring straight ahead like the city lights outside offended him. "Ethan?" she said softly. He turned his head slowly, and the look in his eyes nearly stole her breath. Gone was the cool, calculated CEO. In his place was something hotter, sharper, a storm barely contained. "Don't let men like Harper talk to you like that," he said, his voice low, rougher than she'd ever heard it. Ava blinked, stunned. "I didn't. I handled it." "You shouldn't have to handle it," he bit out, his fingers curling into a fist on his knee. "Not while you're with me." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. And as their eyes locked, Ava realized this wasn't about contracts anymore. This was personal. Terrifyingly, undeniably personal. Midnight draped the city in a blanket of gold and shadow, the skyline glittering beyond the glass walls of Cross Enterprises like a million secrets waiting to be told. The office was empty, except for two people. Ava sat at the long conference table surrounded by stacks of reports and half-drained coffee cups, her laptop casting a soft glow on her face. She rubbed her eyes and sighed. "This is... what? The fourth investor deck we've revised this week?" she muttered, scrolling through spreadsheets that were starting to look like abstract art. Across the table, Ethan didn't look the least bit tired, or human for that matter. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie abandoned hours ago, and his hair was just slightly mussed, the kind of imperfection that made him even more dangerously perfect. "Fifth," he corrected without looking up. "Fifth," Ava echoed, groaning. "Do billionaires sleep, or do you just recharge in some secret pod next to your vintage car collection?" His lips curved faintly. "Would you like me to show you the pod?" She snorted. "Pass. Pretty sure I'd end up in some sci-fi thriller where I sign another contract that ruins my life." Ethan glanced up at that, and for a split second, their eyes locked. The flicker of humor in his faded into something else, something heavier, darker, pulling at the air between them like a magnetic force. Ava's heart stuttered. She looked away too quickly, pretending to focus on the glowing screen. "So," she said, her voice wobbling slightly, "once we finish this, I can finally go home, right?" "Home?" Ethan repeated softly like he was tasting the word. Then, after a beat, "Stay a little longer." She glanced up, startled. "Why?" "Because," he said, rising from his chair with unhurried grace, "I need your input on this section." He rounded the table and stopped beside her chair, his presence swallowing the space like a tide. The scent of his cologne, subtle, expensive, maddening, wrapped around her as he leaned down, one hand braced on the table, the other sliding a page toward her laptop. Ava's pulse thundered as his shoulder brushed hers, warm and solid. Her brain screamed to focus on the report, but her senses betrayed her, catching the heat of his body, the way his voice dipped low when he spoke. "Here," he murmured, pointing to a line of figures. "See this gap? That's leverage if we present it right." She nodded dumbly, her throat suddenly dry. "Right. Leverage, got it." His gaze shifted from the numbers to her face and stayed there, inches away, close enough for her to see the flecks of silver in his eyes, the faint crease near his brow, the line of his jaw that looked carved by sin itself. Ava's breath caught. The air between them crackled, heavy with everything unsaid. Every rule, every clause in that ridiculous contract dissolved like smoke. "Ethan," she whispered, not even sure what she meant to say. And then his hand moved, not away, but to gently tilt her chin toward him, his touch feather-light, yet commanding. Her heart slammed against her ribs as his face dipped, his breath mingling with hers. Inches, one heartbeat, one breath. Her lips parted, his eyes darkened, and then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the overheads blazed to life as the night cleaning crew walked in, chattering in Spanish and rolling a mop bucket across the floor. Ava jerked back so fast she nearly tipped her chair. Ethan straightened, his jaw tightening, his expression shuddering into that cold, unflinching mask she hated. "Long night, Mr. Cross?" one of the cleaners called cheerfully. "Always," Ethan said smoothly, already collecting the papers like nothing had happened. Ava scrambled to gather her things, her pulse still a runaway train. The silence between them was deafening, except for the screaming in her head. What was that? What were we about to do? She slung her bag over her shoulder, mumbling something about calling a car, and fled before she could make the biggest mistake of her life, or the best one. Behind her, Ethan stood alone in the glow of the city lights, his hands braced on the table, his jaw tight with something he didn't dare name. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning, when Ava walked into the office and felt the shift in the air. Conversations hushed, heads turned, whispers trailed behind her like smoke. Her phone buzzed again and again until she yanked it from her bag. Dozens of messages, all the same theme. "Have you seen this?" Heart hammering, she tapped the first link and froze. Inside scoop, Ethan Cross's girlfriend caught with shocking past. Below the headline was a grainy photo of Ava from 3 years ago, laughing with a group of college friends at a bar. The caption read, "From cheap beer to champagne dreams. Has Ava Lane been playing the long game?" Scrolling further made her stomach churn. Old social media screenshots, harmless captions twisted into something ugly, comments dripping with venom. Gold digger. Social climber? Typical. "Oh no," she whispered, her hands trembling as she sank into her chair. This wasn't just gossip. It was a takedown. "Ava." She looked up, startled to find Ethan standing in front of her desk, like a storm in a tailored suit. His jaw was clenched, his phone in hand, his eyes sharp enough to slice glass. "My office," he said, his voice low and lethal. She followed in silence, her throat tight, ignoring the stares burning holes in her back. The moment the door shut behind them, Ethan rounded on her. "Clara," he said flatly, tossing his phone onto the desk. The screen displayed the same headline. "This has her fingerprints all over it." Ava swallowed hard. "Your ex? Seriously? Why would she?" "Because she thrives on control," Ethan cut in. his voice vibrating with barely contained fury. And because making you look like a mistake makes her feel powerful. Ava sank into the chair, her pulse rioting. This is bad, Ethan. Really bad. People already think I'm some opportunist who got lucky on your arm. And now this. Stop, he said sharply, leaning on the desk, his hands braced like anchors. You've done nothing wrong. Do you hear me? She stared at him, stunned by the steel in his voice. This isn't about truth, he continued, his gaze locking onto hers. It's about narrative, and I don't let anyone write mine. The way he said it, cold, absolute, sent a shiver down her spine. What do we do? She asked softly. He straightened, his expression carved from marble. Damage control, I've already called legal and PR. The story dies today. And Clara? Ava ventured. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Clara will regret breathing your name. The room fell silent for a beat, thick with the weight of everything unspoken. Then Ava's phone buzzed again. Another notification, another headline. Her chest tightened until breathing hurt. This is going to ruin me, she whispered, her voice cracking before she could stop it. Ethan was beside her in an instant, crouching so they were eye level. His hand closed over hers, warm, steady, grounding. Look at me, he said, his voice softer now, but still carrying that commanding edge that made people obey. She did. This doesn't define you, he said firmly, and I won't let them touch you. Not them. Not Clara. No one. Her throat burned. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words wrap around her like armor. But a voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was spinning out of control. And for the first time, Ava wondered if the biggest risk wasn't Clara, or the press, or the contract. It was the man kneeling in front of her, making promises he had no business making, and looking at her like he'd burn the whole world down to keep them. Ava stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, gripping the edge of the porcelain sink so hard her knuckles turned white. The headlines wouldn't stop replaying in her head. The whispers, the stares, the pitying looks from people who had once ignored her existence. They were all louder than the running water. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry at work, but one rebellious tear betrayed her, sliding down her cheek before she could swipe it away. Enough, she thought, forcing herself to stand tall. She couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep pretending that all of this wasn't slowly unraveling her life. By the time she returned to her desk, she'd made her decision. Her resignation letter sat in her inbox, cursor blinking like a lifeline. She read it once, twice, then hit print. 5 minutes later, she was standing outside Ethan's office, paper trembling in her hands. His voice came from inside, low and commanding, mid-conversation on a call. Pull the article, all of it, today. A pause. No, I don't care what it costs, handle it. Then silence, a click. And when the door opened, Ethan stood there, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, tension radiating from every sharp line of his body. Ava, he said, and the way her name sounded on his lips almost broke her resolve. Come in. She stepped inside, clutching the letter like a shield. I'm quitting, she blurted before she lost her nerve. His eyes darkened instantly. No. Yes, she countered, her voice shaking but firm. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I can't live under a microscope. I can't wake up every day wondering what headline is waiting for me. You think walking away will fix this? His voice was calm, but the steel underneath made her pulse skip. It'll fix me, she shot back, her throat tightening. Because somewhere in this circus, I forgot who I am. I'm not this glamorous illusion you parade in front of cameras. I'm not built for your world. He crossed the room, in 3 strides, stopping so close she could feel the heat rolling off him. "Don't say that," he said, his voice low, rougher than she'd ever heard it. Her breath hitched. "Ethan, you think I care about the headlines?" He cut in, his jaw tight, his hands curling at his sides like he was fighting to keep them from reaching for her. "I don't. I care about you." The words hung between them, raw and electrifying, stealing the air from the room. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. Don't say that if you don't mean it." His gaze locked on hers, unwavering. "When have I ever wasted words, Ava?" Tears blurred her vision. "You're supposed to keep this fake. That was the deal." "Screw the deal." His voice cracked like a whip, sharp and unyielding. "The second I saw you walk into that gala, it stopped being fake for me." Her breath came in shallow bursts, her resolve crumbling with every word. "You can't. This can't." And then his hand lifted, cupping her jaw with a tenderness that shredded every defense she'd built. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his forehead nearly touching hers. "If you really want me to, tell me." Ava's lips parted, but no sound came out, because she didn't want him to stop, not even a little. The confession pulsed in the air, dangerous and beautiful, as the walls between them finally collapsed. For a moment, the office was nothing but silence and heartbeats. Ava stood frozen, her resignation letter limp in her hand, Ethan's fingers warm against her jaw. His words, "I care about you," still echoed in her head like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. "Tell me to stop," he said again, his voice low, dangerous in its tenderness. "Say the word and I'll let you walk out that door." Ava's throat tightened. Her brain screamed at her to speak, to remind herself why this was wrong, why they had rules, boundaries, and entire contracts spelling out what they could and couldn't be. But her body, her heart, they declared mutiny hours ago. She didn't speak. And in the space of that silence, Ethan moved. His lips met hers in a kiss that was nothing like the cool, controlled man she thought she knew. This was raw, consuming, a firestorm breaking through every wall they'd both spent years building. One hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer, while the other anchored her against him as if daring the world to take her away. Ava melted into him with a sound she didn't recognize, a soft, desperate gasp, her fingers fisting in his shirt like she'd been waiting for this moment since the first time his gray eyes had collided with hers. The kiss deepened, slow and searing, until her knees threatened to give out, and the only thing keeping her upright was him. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough as gravel. "I've wanted to do that since the day you stormed into my office with coffee stains on your blouse." A laugh, shaky, half wild, bubbled out of her. "God, you're infuriating. And yet you're still here," he murmured, brushing his thumb over her cheek. His eyes were darker now, stripped of every ounce of his polished control, leaving nothing but brutal honesty. "Ava, this isn't pretend anymore, not for me." Her chest tightened, her pulse rioting. She wanted to say the same, wanted to tell him that somewhere between fake brunches and staged smiles, the line between real and pretend had blurred beyond recognition. But fear, the cold, rational kind, whispered louder than her heart. "What happens when the world finds out?" she asked softly, pulling back, just enough to see his face. "When they realize this isn't part of the act?" Ethan's jaw flexed. "Then let them talk," he said, his tone steel wrapped in velvet. "I've built empires, Ava. Do you think I'll let gossip tear down what I want most?" Her breath caught. What I want most? Did that mean her? Before she could answer, his phone buzzed on the desk, an unwelcome reminder that reality still existed. He ignored it. His gaze stayed locked on hers like the rest of the world didn't matter. Stay, he said simply. The word sank into her like an anchor, heavy and tempting. Stay. Here. With him. Where every instinct told her she belonged, and every ounce of logic warned she didn't. Her voice trembled when she finally whispered, I don't know if I can. His hand slid down to entwine with hers, his grip firm, grounding. You can, because I'm not letting you go. And with that vow, Ethan kissed her again, harder this time, as if sealing a promise neither of them could take back. When they broke apart, the room felt different, the air heavier, the rules obliterated. The kiss hadn't just changed everything, it had set fire to the very foundation they'd been standing on. The world had a cruel sense of timing. 2 days after the kiss that turned Ava's life inside out, headlines detonated like fireworks across every media outlet. Ethan Cross engaged. Insider claims a surprise proposal is coming. There were no photos yet, but the story was everywhere. Every blog, every finance rag, every gossip column. Investors were ecstatic. Social media was on fire. And Ava, she was one minor panic attack away from hiding under her desk. She stormed into Ethan's office, tossing a tabloid onto his desk with more force than necessary. Engaged? She snapped. Seriously? Did you propose to me in your sleep and forget to mention it? Ethan looked up from his laptop, calm as a glacier. It's a rumor. It's a headline. Ava shot back, her pulse racing. And if this keeps snowballing, you'll have an actual ring on order by dinner. He stood slowly, sliding his hands into his pockets like a man who'd been planning this moment all along. That's why we need to get ahead of it. Ava blinked. Get ahead of it how? By telling the truth, Ethan said simply. Her stomach dropped. The truth? As in, telling the entire world we've been lying for weeks? Yes, he said, stepping closer, his voice like smooth steel. But not the way you think. Before Ava could demand clarification, the door swung open, and in walked Clara, her heels clicking like gunfire on marble. Well, she drawled, her crimson lips curving in a predator's smile. This is cozy. Ava stiffened. Ethan's jaw tightened. Security should have escorted you out, he said coldly. Oh, relax, Clara purred, gliding closer with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. I just came to congratulate you on your engagement. What's the phrase, third time's the charm? Her words dripped venom, but her eyes were all fire and locked on Ava like she was prey. You know, sweetheart, Clara continued, her voice sugar and knives. Men like Ethan don't settle. They entertain until something shinier comes along. Ava's fingers curled into fists, heat surging up her spine. She opened her mouth, then shut it when Ethan spoke first. Enough, he said, his voice like a blade sliding free of its sheath. You've done your damage, but hear this, Clara. If you so much as whisper Ava's name again, I'll make sure you never sit at another board table as long as you live. Clara's smile faltered just slightly, but she recovered fast. We'll see, she murmured before strutting out, the echo of her heels fading like a warning shot. When the door clicked shut, Ava exhaled shakily. Well, that was horrifying. Ethan didn't answer. He was already reaching for his phone. What are you doing? She asked warily. Calling a press conference, he said, as if announcing he was ordering lunch. Ava nearly choked. You're what? I'm ending this, he said, his tone flat, unyielding. No more speculation, no more rumors. By doing what, Ethan? She demanded. His gaze found hers then, intense, molten, stripping her down to the bone. By telling them exactly what I want. And that was how Ava ended up standing beside him under a storm of flashing cameras, her heart galloping like a runaway horse. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, the chaos deafening. Ethan raised a hand, and the room fell eerily silent. His voice, when he spoke, was steady, commanding. "There's been speculation about my personal life," he said. "Allow me to clarify." He reached for Ava's hand, not for the cameras, not for the optics, but like a man claiming what was his. "This started as a mistake," he continued, his tone softening just enough to send heat crawling up her neck. "But somewhere along the way, it became the best decision of my life." Gasps rippled through the room as Ethan turned fully toward her. And then, in front of New York's most ruthless press corps, he said the words that detonated every headline in existence. "I'm in love with Ava Lane." The cameras exploded in a frenzy of light and sound, but Ava heard nothing. Nothing but the roar of her own heartbeat and the quiet, terrifying certainty that this was real. And when Ethan leaned down, cupped her face, and kissed her like the world could burn around them, Ava stopped caring about the rules, the risks, the headlines. Because the man who was never supposed to fall had just fallen. For her. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments on a scale from 0 to 10. What's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.